At this time, I'm going to ask Thomas Brinsko, our moderator, to pop up on the screen with me here as soon as you can, Thomas. A quick introduction of Thomas. He's a former contracts attorney for Exxon and Key Petroleum. Thomas joined BIC Alliance in 1999. He became the president in 2002 and the CEO just this past year. Thomas serves on the board of directors of both the Association of Chemical Industries of Texas and the Economic Alliance. Thomas has two grown daughters and a son, Michael, who is a senior this year. He's an avid Rockets fan, season ticket holder, and he leads a nonprofit group called the Get Together that supports multiple nonprofit groups. Thomas, I see you're here. There you go. Welcome in, Thomas.
Yep. Yeah, thank you, Chad. And it's just such a pleasure to be here. What great content from Mr. Staples, and just an encouragement that the global drivers of supply and demand are going to hold true over the next 2 or 3 decades. We are going to have an oil and gas business, and we just have to steward it as a resource that God has entrusted us with. So I thank you for having us today. We have an outstanding panel. I'm really excited about the panel of procurement professionals that we have. I'm going to introduce them one at a time and let them make some introductory remarks before we get into a little general Q&A. This is your procurement forum. So if you're watching today, I do encourage you to use that Q&A button at the bottom of the page, and we're going to try to get to as many of the audience's questions as we can. But first, I'm going to ask Atul to turn his camera on. Good morning, Atul, and you can unmute your microphone. Atul is the Capital Projects Procurement Manager for Covestro over the NAFTA region, all of North America. And prior to this role, he was in India as procurement head of that nation. He's on a specific assignment here for the capital projects in North America. Has over 18 years of experience in procurement in the chemical, engineering, and IT sectors. Just arrived in the Gulf Coast just over a year ago. And he told me earlier today that he can confirm that everything seems to be bigger in Texas. And so it's the first time today that we've actually had a chance to visit face-to-face, and welcome to the Gulf Coast, Atul. And if you would be so kind, just give us a little general overview maybe of Covestro. If you, at liberty, tell us what projects the company is working upon and how your procurement department is set up generally.
Thank you, Thomas, for the very interesting introduction. Yes, everything is big in Texas. And in fact, I attended the Alliance Forum last year when I arrived, and very happy to be part of this. So thank you for having me here. About Covestro, if I may talk, our vision, making the world a brighter place. And we do that by making innovative products and solutions, but more in a more sustainable way. But the question is, of course, why do we want to do that? We have situations, I think Mr. Staples did talk about the global challenges which we already have with climate change and so on. But another challenge which we right now have is extremely dynamic world economy. It's changing drastically. So we need to produce better, faster, and cheaper products, and yet sustainable for our planet and people. So when I say better, we're talking about more reliable products. When I say faster, we are talking about meeting our ever-increasing demand. And when I say cheaper, it's more related to the affordability of the products. And one thing which we need to think of is how can we expect to do the same thing every day and expect different results? We need to change the way we do the things. And that's only possible by innovations and thinking differently. We know how technology has changed over the past, and it's ever evolving. Covestro, with its thoughts leadership, is pushing boundaries by doing this. We are more engaged into circular economy. energy efficient production areas, even replacing certain fuels by utilizing certain raw materials made out of CO2 and so on. So with this lot of social and economic transformation projects, it's going to be, we're trying to make the world climate neutral and protect its shrinking resources. But I mean, we cannot do this alone. And one of the intention is we want partners. We want ideations and innovations from partners like this forum, who has such a great audience. And I'm sure we would get this. The quantum leap in technology does not restrict anyone. Does not restrict those few seasoned players to innovate. It's now open to everyone. It's a good competition, but I would say a healthy competition. And the small businesses, or I would say they're challenging the status quo of our economy today. So happy to have that and have supply diversity as part of our value contribution. Not to forget the seasoned players who help us with their more experienced and reliable products. Very quickly on the Covestro lineup of products, and would not spend really big time. Everyone knows on those areas. Baytown Covestro is one of the 8 world-scale plants of Covestro, and where we produce polyurethane, polycarbonates, and coatings and adhesives, basically touching every lives of people here and across the globe. And here the competition is not just us. Mr. Staples talked about it's more global competition now, and we need to just ensure that we are ready for it now. So as far as procurement setup is concerned, we are clustered in about 7 key responsibility areas: strategic commodities, intermediates and additives, site services, inorganics and energies, capital investment, business services, and logistics and packaging. So onboarding of any of these processes would require different process, but I'm sure you can reach out to us and we can direct you to the right contact points. So thank you for having me, and happy to be part of this panel.
Are there any specific capital projects that you're working upon right now that you could share with the group?
So there are several of them, and as you know, the current situation with the capital scenario across the globe, and just like every other company, everything is being reviewed again. So I would not have any kind of disclosure at this stage about which kind of capital projects which we'll be talking about. Mm-hmm. But yeah, as normal, turnarounds continue to happen, and that's something which will be focusing more in the coming years.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Atul. Let me introduce our next panelist, Christopher Hawkinson. He's a procurement manager at Kinder Morgan. Christopher, if you can turn your video on and your mic. Chris is in charge of service-related procurement from start to finish. His group is over contractor agreements for all 4 of Kinder Morgan's divisions: natural gas, terminals, CO2, and their products pipeline. Chris has moved around the United States and many times with Kinder Morgan. He seems to have been with the company 16 years. This is his first time to Houston. Moved here about a year ago, July of 19. And when he's not at work, he's spending a lot of time with his wife and his 3 young kids. So he's got 2 twin boys and about to enter the terrible 2 stage, and got a lot of empathy for you there. Chris, welcome to the panel this morning, and thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit about your responsibilities at Kinder Morgan and what's going on over there.
Absolutely, Thomas. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. So as mentioned, our procurement group underwent a significant change in the way we do business about a year ago. Prior to August of 2019, we were aligned with the business units. So there were buyers, CAs, management that reported up through the business unit that supported them functionally. In 2019, we switched that to move away from the alignment to the business unit and put it more by functional area or grouping. And so these days, we are aligned, as previously mentioned. I'm in charge of the services group, along with another manager of mine, report up through a director. The other groups obviously are materials group, strategic group, we have a project group, and then we have a number of supporting ancillary groups. But that more or less constitutes the makeup today. We are, as previously mentioned before, we have the 4 different business units that we support fundamentally. Our natural gas products group being the largest. We also have our terminals group, which in the port you would probably be most familiar with, followed by our products pipeline group, and then our CO2 group, which is concentrated in West Texas. So we support all aspects, services and materials. To talk a little bit more about my functional area, we manage over 5,200 active contracts with a number of different vendors. We contract for all types of services. So my group would typically be responsible for the large dollar capital spend, things of that nature. You know, my coworkers, they would handle the more day-to-day transactional and items that kind of keep us moving and working every day. So typically we handle, you know, some pretty large volumes, transactional, capital. You know, we've seen a little bit of a decrease, obviously, with the announcement this week, but it still doesn't take away from the operations and maintenance and everything else that we're doing on a regular basis. So there are large dollars flowing through us. We ensure that the folks that are working with us obviously have those contracts. They meet our criteria. We work with IS Networld. IS Networld is a third-party vendor of ours that is predominantly used in the oil and gas industry. So I think a lot of people would probably be interested in, you know, what they can do to try to work with us. And being a member in ISN is a very good first step to kind of finalize through our process. We don't have a formalized pre-qualification. It's more of grassroots and getting involved and getting in touch with the right people. But being an ISN is a big first step. Getting evaluated against our lens or our criteria, along with the completion of the contract process, would allow or facilitate work at any of our business units for the contractual term. So the good news is once you're in, you're pretty much in. It's just kind of getting there in the beginning that may take a little bit of work or beating the bushes.
Well, yeah, thank you, Chris. I'm going to move on just for a quick introduction of our next panelist, Mr. Jay Brown. Jay, if you turn your mic on. Jay is the Director of Indirect Materials Procurement for Flint Hills. He is the panelist that's not based in the Houston area right now. He's out of Flint Hills headquarters in Wichita, Kansas, and we're really excited to have you here, Jay. We appreciate that. He's spent the last 15 years in the procurement business, the last 12 of those with Flint Hills. Interesting background. He came out of school as a history major and got into the oil and gas business. And as a Renaissance man of sort, he likes to spend a lot of time outside. Though we were visiting earlier, I understand you went to Yellowstone and Teton National Park this summer with your wife. So that's good stuff. I just got back from the Cascade Mountains myself, so something we share in common, Jay. Jay, tell us about Flint Hills. And I learned something today, and I shared it with about 8 people this morning in our industry. I didn't know exactly the definition of indirect materials, so I'm going to have you start with that and tell us what you do and how Flint Hills is set up for procurement.
Yeah, so indirect materials in our world is basically everything that isn't chemicals or feedstocks into our businesses. And then obviously, much like Chris, our business is set up by capability. And so there's another procurement director that manages our services procurement. And I'm on the materials side, but our feedstocks such as natural gas, crude, propane, anything that we're using to produce our products, that goes through our commercial organization. And so the way that we're kind of set up is we are centralized in Wichita, Kansas, our headquarters. Flint Hills Resources, for those that may not know, is a refining, petrochemicals, and biofuels company with assets basically all across the central time zone, north to south. We are structured in such a way from a procurement standpoint in that we, like I said, we're structured from a capabilities standpoint with services and materials being broken up. Under my purview, we have capital procurement managers within my group. We also have enterprise category managers who are trying to establish strategies across the entire business portfolio. And then we have business focused category managers. So in regards to the Houston area, I have a category manager who is over our olefins and polymers business, which covers our polypropylene facility in Longview, Texas, and our propylene plant in Houston. And so in regards to what it is that we've been working on, specific to the Houston chemical plant, we've had multiple reliability and process control and energy efficiency improvement projects that we are advancing currently, and we're expecting to improve the safety and environmental performance of the plant. We're also advancing a debottlenecking project at the plant that would enable us to basically produce more propylene. And we've got several projects that we've had in the last 5 years that have really increased the asset utilization of that facility as well. As far as engaging us, somewhat similar on the services side, we use ISNet as kind of a filtering mechanism from a safety vetting standpoint. We also, somewhat similar to Kinder Morgan, it sounds like there's a lot of grassroots. We do have some processes that we're trying to experimentally use where we're really looking for understanding what the value proposition from a new supplier is, to really kind of determine what are the differentiators, and rather than just looking at other me too options. So we're really trying, because we have consolidated down our procurement organization, we don't have a large organization to take a bunch of cold calls, and so we've really developed some tools that we try and use to actually send out and ask for vendors to do some homework, to think through their products and their offerings critically, so that they can really kind of help connect us to what differentiates them in the marketplace in those categories.
Are those tools primarily in the form of a questionnaire, or?
Yes, they would be. Yeah.
Excellent. That's interesting. Thank you very much, Jay. Our next panelist, Mr. John Rutledge. John, if you turn your camera on. John has been with BASF for 25 years as a process engineer. He joined the Indirect procurement team 3 years ago, and he currently is managing their capital and technical services team. He is married with 2 children. He's been in Houston for about 10 years now, and he loves to travel and scuba dive. He was telling me that he's been to 35 countries and has made more than 40 dives since getting his certification about 15 years ago. So welcome to the panel, John. Thank you for being here. And tell us a little bit about yourself and BASF.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. Well, I haven't been doing a lot of traveling lately, unfortunately, so but I look forward to this ending and we can start again. So thanks for inviting me to the panel. I'll talk a little bit about BASF first, a little bit about how procurement is structured, and then maybe I'll skip to the punchline and give some of you some tips as how to get in and work for BASF. So without further ado, BASF, I think many of you do know us, but we don't sell directly to consumers, so we're a business-to-business company. So we're not always that recognized. We are the world's largest chemical company, and we're very diversified. So we sell to many customers in many industries. We have 140 sites in North America. Many of them are small, many are offices. But of relevance for this audience, we have 6 production facilities in Texas. We've got smaller ones in Bishop, Pasadena, Houston. We have, I call them medium-sized sites in Port Arthur, in Beaumont, and then we have a large Verbund site in Freeport. That's BASF in a nutshell. In terms of procurement, procurement manages all spend on behalf of BASF. We're split into 3 groups. We've got direct procurement, which sells, purchases raw materials, logistics procurement, which of course procures all modes of transportation, and then indirect procurement, which basically is everything else. So essentially purchase of technical goods and services. I'm in indirect procurement, so that's what I'll chat about today. In terms of structure, we have a centralized and decentralized indirect procurement group. The smaller regional spend is handled by the local buyers. The larger spend, the regional agreements, the global agreements are handled centrally. So for example, pumps would be handled by a category buyer. A certain category buyer, maintenance services would be handled by another category buyer. That's a little bit about procurement. Now, how does one get qualified to work or supply BASF? So I'll tell you the theory. So we have at least 2 parties typically involved, unless the spend is very minor. So if it's a technical good, we would require technical qualification, typically by engineering. Sometimes the requester, it's not so technical. And then it would also be commercially qualified by procurement. If it's technical services, of course, it's a little more complicated. So we'd have technical evaluation again, commercial evaluation, but then we would also have EHS vetting the company, right, to ensure they have a good safety record. We employ a third party called a VETA, and they would capture the information on our behalf, and the company would be flagged either green, amber, or red. Green or amber are okay, can come onto the site. Red, not so good. The chances of getting onto our site are not high. So that's the theory. Now, how does a supplier actually get into BASF? I'll give you a few tips. I'll admit it's not that easy. We do get a lot of unsolicited emails or calls. Usually, of course, it starts with demand. So do we have sufficient number of suppliers in a certain area? If not, we will look for them. Perhaps we're not satisfied with the current supplier base, so we'll, in a given category or region, so we'll go out and look and qualify more. But I would say 5 things to consider and tips to consider. So first, again, I mentioned safety. It's foundational for us. If you're coming to our site, you have to have a very good safety program. And hence, you would have a very good safety record that demonstrates that. So that's number 1. Number 2 is you have to be very competitive, right? We need competitive pricing. Our customers are really pushing us on our pricing. They're pushing us and squeezing our margins. So, we need the competitive approach from our suppliers as well. We're a global company. We have many options in where we can invest. The U.S. is the most expensive place in the world for us to invest. So we do have to attract investment with competitive pricing, right? And we have to deliver our projects on time and on or under budget. That's absolutely critical for us to demonstrate that. The first 2, I think, are obvious. The next 3, maybe not so much, but we're very interested in diversity and inclusion. It's a core value for us as well. So we're looking to our key suppliers to have the same core values as we do. On a recent RFIs, for example, we're asking about the diversity and inclusion program of the participants. We assess this as part of the qualification program. So being able to demonstrate what you're doing in this area is key. As well, we have an active program to increase our diverse supplier spends. When I'm talking diverse suppliers, I'm talking women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, or veteran-owned businesses, and we require the certifications to prove it, right? Next is be creative. Remember, we're being frequently solicited, right, with emails. So you have to do something to stand out from the crowd. I think there are numerous ways you can do this to get our attention. I would say last year we qualified a company because they got our attention. They said, we're going to give you free equipment for a certain period of time. You just have to pay for the labor. So they were qualified at one site. They did a great job, and now they're being qualified at others. So you really have to do something to get our attention. Remember, we have to spend time and money to qualify somebody. So we expect the same commitment from those suppliers that want to get qualified with us as well. And lastly, I would say be innovative, right? And when I'm talking innovative, I'm talking things like improved technology, talking about safer technology, or perhaps lower cost ways of doing things. For example, on the improved technology, we recently qualified a company that cleans heat exchangers in a different way, a non-traditional way. On the safer technology, we are early adopter of automation for hydroblasting, for example. We jumped to that years ago. Actually, we pushed it. In lower cost ways of doing things, we adopted also rope access for inspections years ago, and we're expanding that to do minor maintenance. So those are a few tips. Thanks for listening, and I hand it back to you, Thomas.
Thank you, John. Great job. Excuse me. Our next, and we saved the Miss Trelina Nalling to take the cleanup spot on the panel. Trelina, if you would turn your mic on and the camera. Thank you. Good morning, Trelina. Trelina is with the Purchasing Supply Chain Group over at Lubrizol, where she is over the indirect supply and capital CapEx over there. She works with all sorts of different teams at Lubrizol to develop their sourcing strategies, and in particular to support their business UOI. And she lives in New Caney, Texas. I'll be interested to hear about that commute a little bit, but probably everybody working from home right now. She is got her bachelor's of business administration and management, and loves music and spending time with her family. So nice to meet you, Trelina, and welcome.
Hi, Thomas. Thank you, and thanks for inviting me to participate in the panel. Yes, I work for the BASF Corporation, which provides specialty chemicals for the transportation, industrial, and consumer markets. We have about 8,300 employees with the company. We've been founded since 1928. We have more than 100 facilities all over the world. We sell to more than 100 countries as well. Our mission right now is to move cleaner, smarter, and live better. So that's the mission of the company right now. Our procurement group is set up. We have indirect buyers, we have capital buyers, we have sourcing managers and category managers. And the indirect buyers, and they particularly do the day-to-day buying of indirect supplies, goods, and services. And then our CapEx buyers support all the capital projects that's going on throughout the different plants. Then we have the sourcing managers and the category managers who focus on national alliance agreements, and they also source for different commodities. So they manage different commodities. Some could be like environmental commodities, could be pumps, could be MRO. We currently use S4HANA and Ariba. We issue all our bids out through Ariba when we're sourcing. And to be set up with Lubrizol, we also, just like Christopher and I believe Jay said, or John, that they use IS Network. We use IS Network as well. So IS Network manages our certificate of insurance program. They also manage our safety evaluation, working with our HSE group. So we have requirements set up on IS Network for suppliers in regards to their safety, and our health and safety group reviews that, and they determine if that supplier or vendor is going to be approved based on the requirements of our safety. And then you have to have an access agreement or some type of agreement with us to work on site. And our vendors also attend the Houston Area Safety Council. So they have to complete multiple trainings through the Houston Area Safety Council. And that's pretty much the requirements of being set up with Lubrizol.
Thank you, Trelina. Let me, several of the panelists mentioned safety requirements as an element of purchasing, and I hear that a lot. Do you, as panelists, are there some specific metrics that you are looking at as like a threshold to gain entrance to one of your facilities, either through TRIR or EMR?
So those, when, as I've heard a number of panelists mention, ISN is kind of the gatekeeper to a lot of this. And the one item I think it's important to stress to the folks that are on this panel, having a grade with, let's say, Flint Hill versus Lubrizol versus Kinder Morgan may vary. And those particulars are kind of set by the Environmental Health and Safety Group, at least in our company. And so key metrics like total recordable injury rates, experience modifications, things like that are going to play a key role. Now you start getting down to some of the other topics like DOT, OQ qualified, some of their safety programs. While they weigh, they might not take on more of a lesser weighted value than the key metrics.
Thank you, Chris. But there's not a, I've heard, for instance, that you want your EMR to be below 1 to get into X plant or whatever. You don't have an across the board metric that you're looking for.
No, and now I think it's probably fair to say that some of those things, a higher EMR will contribute to larger overhead costs, perhaps in insurance carrying, and it would be incumbent upon that vendor to be competitive financially. So I wouldn't say there's a limiting number where we're going to cut somebody off, but at the same time, we need to ensure that we're getting value from that contractor and we're looking at the comprehensive whole.
Thank you. Any other panelists have a comment on that?
Yeah, Thomas, I would say for us, we actually do. And so we obviously provide the guidelines to Avetta, who manages this on our behalf. And we do look at, fatalities, for example, and that's something we're very concerned about. So if we want to bring someone, we have that conversation to better understand. In terms of TRIR, we set a threshold of 1.8, for example. So that's kind of the threshold. And most, most companies can meet that, but if they would be immediately flagged as red if they didn't achieve that, and then we would once again have a conversation. But that's, so we do have some metrics in place and things that we assess.
Right, it's built into Avetta or ISNet World, I understand. Could you, panelists, raise your hands if you're using ISNet World? Who said they were using ISNet World? So 3 of the 5. And Avetta? 1 of the 5. Covestro is the only one that didn't raise their hand. Is there a competing system there that, or everything internal for you guys, Atul?
Yeah, I wanted to add to what the panel said. Surely, when we talk about onboarding vendor for the Gulf Coast region where we have a production site, there are certain set of records which we would refer and validate. But over and above that, we also have something called as Together for Sustainability as part of.
Could you repeat that, please?
Together for Sustainability.
Okay.
That's basically caters to the HSEQ part. It's a more global association of, I think, 20 member companies. And we would like our vendors to be assessed through those EcoVadis audits, which help or gives them recognition across this member companies directly and across the globe. So that's one of the additional part. So it's much prevalent in Asia, in Europe, as well as in US. So it's catching momentum, and I think that visibility is much more what I would see every vendor should look at. It's not a compulsion for today, but very soon that we have a target of reaching 85% of our spend coverage through this EcoVadis, or I call this Together for Sustainability ratings with our vendors. So yeah, that's a little different than what the panel has here.
All right, thank you, Atul. 2020 has been a crazy year, at least a crazy 8 months for everybody I know. Panelists, generally speaking, if you don't mind answering, what are going to be your top procurement priorities for the fourth quarter and for 2021? Anybody?
Yeah, I can go. From FHR's perspective, you know, the biggest focus is on keeping our employees safe. Obviously, having to change all of our work practices, maintenance practices, the structure of our teams, the engineered controls have been a huge focus for us. And so, you know, focusing on keeping our employees safe with these new constraints of, frankly, of COVID-19, but also really focused on being a good neighbor, both from a safety and environmental standpoint, and running a good business for our stakeholders. I mean, you know, others have spoken to, you know, our margins are getting squeezed big time as we go through these things. You look at the slides that were gone through in the presentation from Mr. Staples. I mean, jet demand, I mean, that distillate pool, there's not very many places for that to go right now. And so it's really a struggle. So we're focused on innovation, you know, transforming the way that we execute projects, transforming the way that we, you know, execute work within the plant, and, you know, the reevaluation of all of our capital projects portfolio, basically, in light of all these new challenges.
Thanks. A kind of related question. Obviously, all the plants are spending extra money right now on decontamination on a regular basis. What other spends, or how has COVID affected your work processes and thus affected the way procurement is being run and what your spend is upon? As a guy that doesn't work inside the fence, you know, I don't see exactly how the work processes are being changed, and how does that affect your group?
Maybe I'll start, and others can add. But you know, for us, we adopted safe practices very early on, and I think our contractors can attest that. So people coming in the gates, we've limited the number of people who are coming in. If you can work at home, we've pushed people to work at home, right? I only came back to the office for the first time last week for a couple of days, and we're still, so most people are not working at the office or not working at the site if they can avoid it. And people who are coming onto the sites are very restricted and limited. And of course, projects have been impacted for us as well, right? That those key projects that have to move forward are moving forward. But I think similar to what Atul had said, we're managing things very carefully right now and assessing, you know, what does move forward and what doesn't. So work practices have definitely changed. We're much more cognizant of that, and so we're, you know, it has affected how we operate for sure.
Has COVID affected the supply chain? So it makes it harder to get certain products or services? You got to throw that in generally to the panel as well, you know, with the work processes.
So I'll take a stab at this one. You know, back in the early part of the year, yes, MRO, the world was fighting over, and there were large constrictions. And I think I see everyone shaking their heads here. And, you know, our main suppliers were constricted. So we had to develop secondary, tertiary, and beyond in order to keep our folks that needed to be inside the facilities working, to keep them safe. And for a good while there, it was very constrained, but it wasn't for our lack of trying to develop new sources, trying to find the material. But as I mentioned, the world was fighting over this. So it was few and far between. We were able to work through it. We've developed some new supply lines. We think we are pretty well prepared as we roll into potentially what may be a resurgence. But, you know, I'll throw it out to anybody else that would like to comment.
I can add a little bit to what Christopher said. Yeah, supply chain impact, certainly every company, every organization have several projects which were already lined up, and we never expected this pandemic to come this way. So everyone, I'm sure, had some kind of a risk register, and we went back to our books, listed down our vendors. It's no longer like a hurricane readiness, what we used to have, which was affecting a particular region. It's more global now. So a lot of analytics went into it to really understand where we would get exposed. So you're not talking just US, probably starting with Asia and several other countries which got impacted. So identifying, monitoring, collaborating with stakeholders as well as your peers in the different regions. It has definitely affected utilization rate. It has definitely, there's a different thought process now when we look at a sourcing effort now. So, I mean, there is one factor which we now added when we do an evaluation before we make our decision. So yes, it has made a change. It has made an impact.
I think generally it's kind of been a mixed bag because you see the MRO space really constrained, but in some other areas there's a lot of excess capacity out there, and you know, we've got, you know, shorter lead times than we would typically have on some of this fabricated equipment. And so we're kind of in an interesting spot where everything from a capital procurement standpoint is on hold, but now would be the ideal time to do it. But we're all reevaluating the economics of the projects in general. And I think, you know, some of our concern from a Flint Hills Resources standpoint is that there's possibly a wave coming when this, you know, gets back to whatever new normal is, and everybody's going to be fighting over those same finite resources, and there will be constraints. And so I think that's probably going to be a reality.
I've heard a lot of that myself, Jay, that, you know, everybody's going to try to get their projects done when it's safe to do so medically. Yep. And it could really be a constraint.
I mean, we're big capital intensive businesses, right? And we can only forego some of these major maintenance projects for a certain amount of time before it becomes untenable, frankly, to run our businesses. So that's something that is a reality out there, and hopefully it's not a cliff, but it's out there in our minds for sure.
Well, I know all of my owner panelists have to be a little more politically correct and can't speak off the cuff, but certainly a lot of the service providers that I deal with, they're all expecting a rather robust second half of next year. And I have a couple of them telling me that 2022 is already looking like a record year for them based on the way things have slid on the calendar to the right. I want to leave the whole COVID discussion for a second and ask one last question before I turn over the questions to our audience, and I'll let Chad moderate that. But my business is like the service contractors and the material contractors who are providing with you. We want to earn your business, and then once we have it, we want to keep it. When you have built long-standing relationships with certain vendors, what are the top reasons, in your opinion, that those relationships have lasted?
Maybe I'll kick it off. I think we like dealing with companies that have, mentioned it earlier, similar core values to us. So that's number one. Great safety record. A continuous improvement mindset, right? Competitive pricing. So they're coming along and they're partners with us on this journey. Those who maybe don't last are those who, you know, get complacent and they stop delivering value and stop really working with us as partners. And that's kind of where, you know, we start asking those questions. Should we go out and explore the market? So that's a couple of things from our side.
I would say definitely those that continue to be safe, continue to be competitive, and those that work with us and are actually partners with us that come to us and offer us recommendations on efficiencies, improvements, out of the box ideas. So definitely those type of relationships are either, you know, relationships where we can bring on additional facilities, national alliances, agreements. We have a lot of suppliers that we're working with to set up catalogs in our SAP system, which brings a lot of efficiencies for us. And so we those are the type of partnerships that we value and we continue to look for.
I think building on what, sorry, go
please.
ahead. Cool.
So I can only add to that. As I said earlier, also safety, reliability is the basic qualification which we need to have before we even move ahead. The few things which gets added to it are more on the sustainability part. But as I said in my previous part, that making it better, faster, and cheaper, I think that's where the focus lies. The competition is not here. The competition is across the globe, and we need the support from this team to make that difference. Bring us those innovative suggestions, ideas where we can collaborate. Cost transparency. I mean, today with a lot of analytics across the internet and various research organizations, cost is no longer hidden secret anymore. So being cost transparent, being able to share what we really are talking about in terms of any capital projects or services, it brings trust, collaboration, and eventually we can go a long way with that. So I think we need to move in that direction, I would say.
Yeah, I think, just to build on that, I mean, that's exactly the strategic partnerships. It's what we kind of call them internally. That transparency and that collaboration is what's built those. It really, us being candid in sharing what the value drivers of our project or what the value drivers of the asset are, and them sharing what their value drivers are and what their constraints are. And we talk through our constraints and we come up with, innovative solutions to those issues. And that really really looking for that win-win of how do we, come to a better solution at the end of the day than us just, the copy-paste engineering of the past just isn't acceptable anymore. And so it's really looking at, hey, here's what we've done in the past. Here's our constraints. Here's what we'd like to be able to do. We haven't really figured out how to do this. How do we work together to come up with a better solution?
Well, thank you to all our panelists. Chad, are you going to join in here and maybe throw in a few questions from the audience?
Sure. We've and thanks again to the panelists. Great discussion, and appreciate your openness and willing to kind of peek behind the curtain, if you will, to your businesses and how to do business with the companies in this region. Yeah, several questions. Let's jump right in. And we have heard this. It was one of our first questions from Van Wigington. We've heard a lot of discussion over the last 7-8 months now about supply chain and impacts to supply chain. And so we've heard that discussion. We've seen some things happening. Van asks, have lead times for spares and critical spares and parts or supply, have the lead times increased, or the ability, the necessary or the necessity to moderate your supply chain to make sure that you can keep doing what you want to, producing the products you want to make? Has that changed significantly? And if so, talk a little bit about what that looks like. I'll throw that to anybody.
Yeah, I kind of spoke a little bit to it earlier. I think that, for the most part, what we need to run our business from, maintenance events and just continued operations, we really haven't seen a lot of constraints. It's more around those ancillary products of, the new normal workplace of, how we're managing and changing the way that we do work in the facility. Those PP&E items, that's a different story. Hand sanitizer was probably one of our most interesting supply challenges. And I would, you talked to me, 8-9 months ago, I would never have thought that would have been a constraint, to the point where we were even considering changing some of our biofuels plants to making hand sanitizer, for our own internal use. So.
Anybody else want to make a comment on that?
Yeah, I'll give a legal answer, a legal response. I would say it depends. So it's similar to what Jay had said. There were certain areas where you simply had a challenge getting things. PPE obviously was one of them because you're fighting. In other areas, I mean, we have things fabricated in other countries. And India was shut down for a while and we had equipment over there. So trying to get that made and over to here, sometimes the logistics chain between wherever it was being made and here was a challenge. But I would also say on the services side, we had no challenges at all, right? You just had to take the precautions and it was fine. I think things that manufactured locally, we did receive some force majeures from some companies, but I think it was more hey, just because of the uncertainty, we'll give you a force majeure. But ultimately, there wasn't, I would say, a major impact. So, so once again, it depends. It's very dependent on what it was you're trying to procure.
That's good. You just raise your hand if anybody else wants to comment, but I think it speaks to the really the essential nature of our chemical industry and how well these businesses are already productive and efficient in producing their product. And just the fact that we saw very little reduction in production across the board for almost all markets, unless they were impacted by, say, auto manufacturers shutting down or countries not being able to send products our way. So other than isolated cases like that, it seems to me, and really kind of showed out in the numbers, that the production of our petrochemical industries really maintained very near normal levels, which was good to see on all fronts. So a couple of specific questions. So Victor Canada says, I'm familiar with IS Networld. Would you briefly talk about the alternative of Breda? And I hope I'm saying that right. Just a couple of comments on that software package. Who was using that one? That we have one or two. John? Yeah.
Breda, yeah. It's a very similar thing to IS Networld, Cognibox. There's a bunch of programs out there. It's just very similar program, very similar provider. Essentially, what we do is we capture the safety information and insurance information of the companies, and we kind of use them to vet. So it's very, very similar to some of the others. I'm familiar with the others. For procurement, I was on the sales side, and I recognize every company has at least 5 different programs out there that companies use. So it's unfortunate, nice to standardize, but it is what it is.
Good. Follow up. Victor says they're a small forensic engineering firm that performs failure analysis and chemical composition testing for metals and materials. Would they be better off going through an IS Networld and or a service like that? It sounds like the answer would be yes, but I'll let one of you guys answer that. For a small company doing testing?
Well, for FHR, it would depend on whether they would be doing that analysis on-site or off-site. If we'd be sending out for forensic analysis, failed pieces of equipment to their facility for that analysis, they wouldn't need that.
Okay.
That's the same for us. If you're coming on site, that's when it's important. If you're doing your work off-site on our behalf, we don't require it.
Agreed. We have the same differentiation. It'll still require a contract and certain insurances or other, but ISN would not be a requirement at that point.
Very good. Very good. And I'll give everybody a couple of more chances to type in some questions. One of our questions was simply this: is this going to be recorded and shown later? And yes, this is being recorded. Right now, we will scrub this and post it up on our YouTube site probably within a day or two, so that anybody that wants to go back and really dive into some of the answers that have been given, because the information is really good. Next quick question, and we've got time for a couple of more questions. Is SAP still used for FICO, PM type of thing? Is SAP a product that's still out there?
We're using SAP HANA 4 for our purchasing. That's how we issue our purchase orders. SAP HANA 4. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Same for us.
SAP continues to be the backbone of the organization for sure, but we do have complementary applications which will sit along with SAP, like we said, Ariba and a few others, which will complement the tool. So yes, SAP still continues to be the tool.
Okay.
We're not using SAP as FHR. We have Infor, which is actually owned by Koch Industries. So there's some connection and some driver for us to use them. But we also use Track for on-site labor for billing and time management purposes.
Very good. Very good. I see one of our members, Sam Bowen, has tried to ask a question a couple of times. Sam, if you can punch that back in, I'll try and get that up there for you. I did have a question though about, oh, here it is. First, visitors inside the sites. I'm not sure exactly if that means visitors or contractors inside the sites right now. Just a quick overview of what it is. What's it looking like at the facilities right now? Is it just, or you got contractors back in? Are there any type of in-face meetings, non-essential meetings, kind of in the facilities, that type of thing? What's the current situation in our facilities as we speak today?
It's tough right now. There's a lot of concern about, taking down an operator crew or maintenance crew. Our facilities are pretty thinly staffed anyway, and so there really isn't. It's tough for the traditional cold call. I'm going to show up with a box of kolaches and try and sell you something. That's not something that's really flying right now. So. And I don't really have any timeline on when that's going to get back to normal for us.
Very good.
Yeah, that's the same for us. Yeah. The visitor has to be critical, assessed as critical before they can get onto our site. And similar timeline, who knows, when this will stop.
Very good. Pretty much the same for everybody, I guess.
Yeah,
that's correct.
For us as well.
Yeah.
I can just add one additional point here is, of course, people coming at site, but also us visiting any vendor site for witness or testing. There are certain protocols we would like to assess first and validate before we even go out for that visit. So I think with COVID, a lot of things have I would say standardized now, and I think that is going to be the new norm.
Yeah, that's actually a good call out. That's been some of the innovation is, instead of sending guys to Mexico to witness, an NSHP, test or, performance test, we're doing it via Microsoft Teams. Or even, we did a check valve, test via FaceTime earlier this year. So that has really changed, and to Atul's point, we're not in the mode of even visiting our partner facilities right now, which is unfortunate, frankly.
Okay. Specific question for Christopher. What were some of the challenges that Kinder Morgan faced when transitioning from a business unit centered procurement model to being centralized?
A number of different ones. And I'll speak from personal experience. I came from the East Coast down to this lovely weather that you guys have down here. So that aside, it was taking what was the way things were done. This is the way we did it here. This is the way we did it there. So part of the reason behind centralizing was to kind of bring people out of those silos, work to move towards best practices and things of that nature. So it was a lot of coming together. I think we've continued to maintain and satisfy our customers, and we've learned a lot in the last year. And so now we're just trying to look to capitalize on what we've learned to continue that improvement process forward. But to summarize, it was a lot of different business units that came together, that grew by acquisition, divestiture, things of that nature, that might not have been firing on all cylinders. And that was really the purpose to come together, I think.
Very good. Very good. All right. We do have, I'll finish with one last question, more kind of a pathway to doing business question here. So again, Sam Bowen, one of our members asks this. So he said, if they offer a solution that lowered cost to warehoused finished product in a safer way for your 3PLs and 4PLs, does it make sense for them to make the petrochemical producers aware of that system as they're really servicing your 3PLs and 4PLs? Would it benefit them to talk to y'all about that in an effort to get into those 3PLs and 4PLs or those warehouses? Does that make sense? Anybody can jump in there on that.
Well, for us, that would be managed through our commercial organization. They manage the third-party logistics facilities, and so that wouldn't go through us per se from an FHR perspective.
Okay.
Yeah, I think similar for us as well. I think we're a different category which would be handling that.
I think I'd mentioned earlier, we have a logistics procurement organization, and they would be the ones who would be involved in that discussion. It's very dependent ultimately on the setup of the different business units and the different sites. You know, some manage that themselves, some outsource, so it's hard to give a really a standard answer to that. You know,
sure.
Once again, it depends.
Yeah. Well, that does it for our time this morning. Let me reiterate, thank you guys for spending your morning with us and really, like I said, sharing your insight to a lot of people that do business with the chemical industry here in the region. We really, really appreciate it. It all works together as a team. The better vendors that you guys can have, the better business and products and efficiencies you can put out. So it really works together, and y'all taking time to open up that window and let these people talk to you and hear from you and get to know who you are. It's invaluable, and we really, really appreciate it. Appreciate everything that y'all do. We ask y'all all to continue to be safe and continue to put out those great products that you're doing. And then let's look forward to a fantastic year in 2021. Thomas, as moderator, thank you so much. We really appreciate everything that you brought to the table and what BIC does for the industry as far as bringing information together. You guys do a fantastic job. So with that, I will say, that again, we want to thank Todd Staples again. He did a fantastic job in kind of teeing us up with our keynote presentation. One more time, I want to say thank you to our sponsor. I even heard it referenced in the comments there about the Houston Area Safety Council. And that's going to be very difficult for me to stop saying, but it is now the Health and Safety Council with their brand newly rolled out branding and new name as they expand farther and farther and farther beyond Houston. But they do a fantastic job in training and educating and putting that safety into all of our contractors as they go into these facilities. So thank you to the Health and Safety Council and Luis Aguilar and his team there. They do a fantastic job for the industry as well. So thank you for that. Finally, I will mention two quick things that we have upcoming before the year is over. On December 3rd, we're opening our office to our regular open house Christmas party. We want to invite everybody to come. It will be live and in person, not virtual. We will have food, food and drink, so you can drink and network and enjoy. We'll be doing our best health and safety protocols, but we want to get together and really see everybody and tell them thank you for this year and everything that they've done. And then finally, on December 9th, our legislative kickoff webinar, it will be a virtual event. It will include 8 of this region's state elected officials, including senators and state representatives, to look into next year's session and see what's going to happen and see what those policies are going to be, see what kind of budget we can expect, and really take the opportunity to deliver this organization's white paper to them on the issues that we want them to handle during that session. So that's all the announcements I've got. Thomas, to the panel, again, I say thank you all very much. Thank you to all of our guests that logged in this morning. We appreciate you coming and taking time and listening to the panel and the presentation from Todd. It will be online. Just check our website and our YouTube page within the next day or two, and we should have this posted up. But with that, we'll say thank you again. Be safe and God bless. We're logging off.